Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
All right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, everybody. Thank you for joining us. This is Krishna Vedula from UMass Lowell, and it's really my pleasure to have introduced my colleagues from UMass Lowell who will be talking about global entrepreneurship. And this is the webinar 6 in a very popular series that we have been presenting through our Jack M. Wilson Center for Entrepreneurship. And in fact, today's speaker is in fact Jack Wilson himself, whose name is dedicated to this to the center. And we have he will be talking about teaching technological entrepreneurship and trends related to that. And as you can see, a very distinguished career. Just quickly reading out a few sentences about him. He is the President Emeritus of the University of Massachusetts and distinguished professor of higher education, emerging technologies and innovation. He served as the 25th president of the University of Massachusetts system from 2003 to 2011. Prior to that, he had been serving as the vice president of academic affairs for the University of Massachusetts system and the founding CEO of UMass Online. As vice president, he was responsible for the coordination of academic programs and research and teaching throughout the 5-campus system. He's also a former entrepreneur who built on his research in network computing to found and build the iLink computer software company, who took it through 3 rounds of venture capital and built it into a $500 million market cap company on NASDAQ before taking it through triple reverse merger and being acquired. So it's such a pleasure, delight to have Jack Wilson with us and for him to take this, share some of his valuable time with us. But just before we get to Jack, I'm going to hand this over to our colleague from UMass Lowell, Ashwin Mehta, who's been coordinating all our programs. I'm going to make him the presenter. So Ashwin, it's up, it's over to you. You can click show my screen.
Thank you, Krishna, and welcome to the Jack Wilson Center for Entrepreneurship webinar series. This webinars are organized to provide the entrepreneurship education and teaching methods that we use at UMass Lowell, and it's my great pleasure to have Dr. Wilson talk about his vast experience in teaching and leading technological entrepreneurship and the trends. So, Dr. Wilson.
Okay, I will make him the presenter and he will be all set. Okay, just give me a minute. I'll make him a presenter. Okay, Jack, all you have to do is click show my screen and you will be visible.
I think I'm all set. I'm going to go to, in just one moment, I will go to full screen mode, but I think you can see this as it is right now, the title slide. And if we could confirm that everything is okay there, I will just continue on. I'll begin by thanking Krishna Vedula and Ashwin Mehta. These 2 individuals are individuals that I've known and worked with for a very long time and admire their work. When it comes to global entrepreneurship and global engineering, their career goes so far back that when they asked me if I would be willing to be a part of that, I immediately said yes, because I've had the opportunity of working with them for so long. So it's my great pleasure to be here and to talk to you under the heading of global entrepreneurship, to consider technological entrepreneurship and teaching technological entrepreneurship and some of the trends. And that's what I'd like to do today. I want to start by, on this slide. I've been introduced already, so you kind of know that I've done a number of things in the past.
I think we need the full screen mode. Can you go into full screen mode, Jack? Is that?
I wanted to go into full screen mode right after this slide.
Oh, okay, got it. Okay, got it. Go ahead, please.
I had planned to do that because I'm going to, if I go to full screen mode, I have to come back. I'm going to flip over to a website.
Understood. Sorry, yeah, I didn't get that. Go ahead, please go ahead. Yeah.
No problem. And by the way, anytime that you wish to chime in and something, I'm delighted with that. I think it makes it better. The more people that get involved and speak up, and also it helps me to know that people are able to see the things that I'll go into full screen mode after I finish this slide and pop off to a website. But I guess the point that I wanted to make here on this page, I was proud to show the Wall Street Journal, which wrote a front page article about I'm calling your attention to that in regard to this, is that site has a collection of materials to help individuals to teach entrepreneurship. I can tell you that many entrepreneur professors all around the world, in Europe, some in Asia, and in the United States, have taken advantage of going to those materials and finding those materials. That's why I was going to just take a second now to go over that link would bring you to this particular web page that I hope you're all able to see right now, which is, kind of my home page. And from that home page, if you scroll down a little bit, you can see some of the courses that are available, that materials are available for. And one of the places that you can go from there is to the Jack M. Wilson Center for Entrepreneurship page, which also has lists of resources for courses such as Principles of Entrepreneurship, Technological Entrepreneurship, Global Entrepreneurship, Starting a New Venture, all sorts of case studies, glossaries of terms that can be used with students. And as I said, these are licensed. These are things that I've developed and are licensed under the Creative Commons license, so that you have permission to use these with attribution, but with the usual caveat that it needs to be identified as the source where it came from. It can't be presented as anyone's own material. So I wanted to begin with that to say that anything that piques your interest during this time that we're discussing right now, you will be able to go to that link, jacklwilson.com, and to the other links that I have in here. I have a link, for instance, to a case study of the iLink Corporation on this page. Any of these links will take you to publicly available materials that may be used with students, including a full textbook in Principles of Innovation and Entrepreneurship that's publicly available, plus some other materials that a complete set of slides and teaching materials for technological entrepreneurship, and a complete set of slides and teaching materials that can be used in courses in global entrepreneurship. So now I will go full screen as it was suggested for the continuing of the presentation. So, back to the positioning. I always begin with a little bit on why does it matter? Why does anybody care about innovation and entrepreneurship? Why have we seen entrepreneurship grow from almost never taught in universities to being taught in universities all over the world? And the reason for that is that innovation and entrepreneurship has proven to be the most successful way to address problems, and that includes both economic problems and social opportunity. And for instance, I have cases that address Mother Teresa as a social entrepreneur. And if you think that that's a little bit unusual, you might go have a look at that case and see why I make that case. I have a case in there of a UMass Lowell graduate Harish Hande, who was a social entrepreneur in solar electricity in India, in fact, with Celco company. I have social entrepreneurs in the United States. I have social entrepreneurs in China and other places around the world. So the point is, it matters because it solves problems. That's the first reason it matters. The other reason entrepreneurship matters is that if you fail to understand entrepreneurship, it frequently means that whatever enterprise you're involved with has the opportunity of disappearing. Here in the United States, especially right here in Massachusetts, where Route 128 was once known as the Silicon Valley of the United States, and companies like Digital Equipment, Wang Computer, Data General, and many, many others dominated the computer industry with the mini computers. And they understood that the microcomputer was coming, but they didn't understand how it was going to change their world. The result is those companies, all of them, Digital Equipment, Wang, and Data General, are gone today. We've seen Borders once operated almost 659 bookstores across the country. They never saw Amazon.com coming, and now they're gone. In the United States, video rental business was a big business with Blockbuster, but now it comes from Netflix and other digital. So the second reason is, the first reason, remember, was it can help you solve problems. The second reason is it can help you survive. The third reason is that companies that do innovate can really succeed wildly. And I don't really have to say too much about that, because we all know what happened with Google, Amazon, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Apple, and I could go on and give examples all around the world. The next reason is that, and I'm going to show data on this in a moment, that those geographic regions that foster and support innovation, usually linked to great research universities, but not always, are flourishing economically. So those places that seem to support innovation seem to be doing well economically. Those places that don't seem to support innovation do not do as well. It's a bidirectional correlation, and but it is a correlation. And of course, the last one that I'm citing here of why it matters is the obvious reason that it creates jobs for our citizens. It cures for our diseases. We have a UMass Medical School. We have won the Nobel Prize with our Professor Craig Mello for gene silencing, RNAi. I've taken him on a tour, in fact, of Asia, where people stood in line for hours to hear his talk on gene silencing and RNAi. And of course, we have patented many of those things, and we have licensed them to organizations around the world that are developing cures for diseases like macular degeneration, and that's one example. Those jobs for our citizens, cure for our diseases, and lastly, new ways for human beings to interact. And of course, we're sitting here interacting in a way that was impossible in the last generation, and now is something that we kind of do every day. This slide is just a beautiful piece of artwork, which I like, which is trying to emphasize my point of why innovation matters, because those companies that we talked about, Digital Equipment, Wang, Data General, and Borders, and so on and so forth, if you fail to adapt, the laws of evolution tell us that you disappear, just as the dinosaurs disappeared. I'd love to talk about two key concepts in innovation, because it can help us organize our thinking about technological entrepreneurship. There are two main ways. The first way identified was by Joseph Schumpeter on creative destruction. You probably are aware of this. I'll just mention it in brief. But this is when a new technology comes out, and you immediately know that that new technology is going to make old technologies obsolete. And it just takes the heart of the market away immediately. I grew up with a record player playing vinyl records. My children probably don't even know what vinyl records are. The first time that I saw a CD, or a DVD for that matter, I knew right away that vinyl records were going to be obsolete, because the CD was less expensive, higher fidelity, cheaper to produce. That was creative destruction. It completely destroyed the market for vinyl records. And there are many such examples of that. I just happened to pick that one. But there's a more subtle approach too that people don't understand as well. And this is the one that often causes people to fail. And that's called disruptive innovation. And that was postulated by Clayton Christensen, a Harvard University management professor. He's written many, many books, and perhaps you've written several of those. But for technological entrepreneurship, this is really key because, in fact, this is the way that many things have disappeared. He did a study of the steel mini mills, how they, when they first came out, and you're familiar with that certainly around the world, that steel mills, mini mills began to spring up all around the world. And at first, the big steel companies said, we're not worried about those mini mills because they create poor quality steel, they sell at a low price, we don't make any profit on rebar in the low priced area of the market, so we don't care. We're going to just continue making the really great steel that has the high profit, and therefore we'll just ignore these steel mini mills. Of course, what happened was the mini mills grew better and better, and they grew into the main part of the market, and they began to take the market away from the old line steel companies. I talked about the mini computer makers disappearing. That's what happened to them. They knew about the PC. They could build personal computers. They even did build some personal computers. But what they didn't know was that this was a toy from their perspective when they first saw it. They didn't know that eventually these personal computers would sit on desks in every company of the world and would in fact become the primary access point for access to computing power. They didn't understand that. They thought it was a toy that would have a little bit of a niche market. And so those personal computers began in niche, unexplored markets, selling to hobbyists and so on and so forth, and grew until they displaced the large older computer companies. So, okay, so that is just, a little bit of background on that, which as I said, I provide links in this talk, which you can get on that website that I showed you, that will allow you to go as deeply into any of these things as you want. This picture is a picture of one of my partners in iLink. Intel was an investor in our company. Andy Grove was the CEO at that time. He was tremendously supportive of what we did. And I always loved one of his comments, which sums up what I just said about survival. He said, only the paranoid survives. That means that those individuals who are always looking around and trying to see what new technology is going to change the way the world works. Those are the individuals that are always looking for that, not the individuals that are so confident that they have the greatest company in the world and nobody can touch them. It's the individuals who worry about what new little technology, it seems like a toy today and seems unimportant, is going to come and change everything. Steve Jobs. I had the opportunity to work with Steve Jobs on the next computer. I was at the University of Maryland, College Park at the time as a professor of physics, really doing computer modeling and computer software. And I was involved in creating some physics software for the next computer. He would come to our labs. We had a large group of faculty there working with him. And he was extremely impressive because he was, even though the people in the room at the University of Maryland College Park, which came from physics and computer science, even though these individuals were some of the greatest minds in these fields, Steve Jobs somehow knew where the world was going better than we did in many ways. And he was oftentimes, we kind of laughed about him, thinking he'll never be able to do that. And then he kind of convinced us that he could, and we helped him do it. And so it's a difference between being a leader and a follower, as he said. Which brings me now to the why do countries care? This is a graph, the Global Innovation Index, and I don't know if you're familiar with it or not. Don't have the ability to go too deeply into it, but there is a link where you can go and look at all the underlying work on this thing. And you can see various companies that are countries that are plotted on here. And what they're looking at is the x-axis has the GDP per person at purchasing power parity, adjusted for the purchasing power in each of the countries. And the y-axis is the Global Innovation Index, a measure of how innovative, and that, as I said, you can follow the link and see how that is all calculated. And you see right away that there is a correlation between the GDP per person and the Global Innovation Index. That higher GDP per person implies a more innovative economy. So that's why they care. And we also know that, I'll go quickly through this because you're quite aware of that world markets are larger and faster growing than domestic ones. So when we teach technological entrepreneurship, we want to introduce students to the world market, not just our local market. We know that changes in technology, transportation, and trade liberalization made a lot of this possible, and we're concerned at this point about whether or not the world is stepping back from that the global approach to trade liberalization, transportation technology. But it certainly has made a difference in the world. Consumers worldwide choose from a wide variety of goods and services from all around the world. And also that the movement of goods, labor, capital, and even people around the world has enabled a lot of this kind of a thing. Here in the United States, I often remind our students that if you have an enviable position of having 1/3 of the US consumer market for your products, you still only have a 1.5% share of the global market, meaning that 98.5% of the market is still available. And the link, of course, to the World Bank will let you see more about that. So this summarizes what I just said. Technology advances. This is why we're going to be talking about this, of enabled global entrepreneurship, trade liberalization, and the freer movement of people. The three major things that underlie that. So let's have a look at the entrepreneurial growth in economies varying by countries, looking at the gross domestic product over time. And we can see that countries that have invested in innovation, and India and China and the United States are singled out as two to show that. The United States is much larger, but to be fair, they started much larger. But all three of those economies have showed tremendous growth, and as have others, and all of them have outpaced the economies that are less dependent upon innovation. And you can see this when you list the global unicorns. Okay, here's a list of a unicorn. Of course, is a company that has achieved a $1 billion market valuation. And right away, you look down this list of global unicorns, and you see that, yep, the United States has many on there, like Uber and Airbnb and SpaceX and Palantir. And this is actually a few years old data now. So some of this has changed rather dramatically. But we also see that, China and India are on this list, and even Sweden with Spotify made the list of global unicorns. So once again, technological entrepreneurship is an absolute key component of global entrepreneurship. And the key part of that is great research universities. I have an entire chapter in my book on this, which you can go have a look at some point, another time. But the places that have invested in great research universities, and India again is a place that I would single out as a place that has made those investments in some great research universities. And when you look at the economic development around those universities, you see exactly the patterns that we've talked about the increased domestic product linked to innovation. This is a country by country rather than a region by region, but the pattern looks the same if you look at regions within countries, for instance, in the United States, if you look at Boston with all of its great universities, or Massachusetts really and all of its great universities, if you look at California and their great universities, if you look at North Carolina around Research Triangle Park, if you look at Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania around the Carnegie Mellon, the University of Pittsburgh, Mellon Institute, Duquesne University, and some others, you see that same clustering phenomena. And you see it in other countries as well. So great research universities and technological entrepreneurship most certainly are a key reason for that. So that's why, in fact, we're really teaching technological entrepreneurship, because we want to encourage our students to follow an entrepreneurial path, because we want them to create a future for themselves, but we want them to create a future for our other citizens in our regions. We also want to make sure that we bring that academic research, I mentioned our Nobel Prize winner, into products in the marketplace and, cures for diseases. And once again, I have links here that will take you through that. I'm going to, kind of brush over this. I hope that you either have or will have at some point, have a look at the 2015 report of the World Bank about existing literature and 230 program evaluations. They talk about, who's being targeted. They talk about training programs versus education and the various pieces of that. They talk about the outcomes they're looking for. They're looking for entrepreneurial mindsets, changes in the way we look at things, capabilities, our knowledge and technical skills, status, change in the things that we do, performance, can we get better at it? And then they ask what dimensions shape this: economic, political, cultural context, participant profiles, cultural differences, and what are the program characteristics that we're going to be, we already are talking about a bit today. The other source for a lot of information on this is the Kauffman Foundation. And one piece of interesting data just shows the growth between 1995 and 2012, many more today, by the way, where only 400 universities offered classes in entrepreneurship in 95, and it's 2,000 today, okay? And they also begin to address the issue of how do you teach entrepreneurship and what do you teach in entrepreneurship? And I want to spend some time on that. Now, I have to acknowledge that since I began as a professor in 1969, which means that I've been a professor of some sort or another for 50 years, that I recognize that getting things to change is hard. And we always run into this in our universities. People are resistant to change. I remember many years ago, I was part of a group at the National Academy of Sciences presenting research from the cognitive sciences that showed that excessive use of lectures are fine, they're good, but excessive use of lectures as the sole method of teaching really doesn't provide the learning that we want. Now, a famous physicist and a friend of mine in the audience stood up indignantly and exclaimed, "A lecture is a stable product of many years of evolution." This is why I include that slide. The dinosaur was a stable product of evolution for much longer than human beings, I replied. The point is, evolution doesn't create stable products. They're always evolving to adapt to conditions. So we, as universities, have to adapt as well. And we know from the cognitive science research that engagement with the material is absolutely imperative. So that we have to get students into activities. When teaching entrepreneurship, we have to think about what kinds of things can we do with them, which will create that engagement. And we should always consider the evolving understanding of entrepreneurship and how to engage with that. And I'm going to, slip into now some discussion of how our approach to teaching technological entrepreneurship has changed and why it has changed, and the data that we have on those changes. Okay, this slide is really just about lectures are a great thing. I'm not against lectures. We've all heard terrific lectures. Few of us have ever heard 3 hours on the same subject in any week that were great lectures, and almost none of us have heard 45 hours straight of engaging lectures in one semester for each credit class. So you really have to do things. I'm going to posit that the case study is an important part of that, of engagement, and also involving the students with experiential learning is a big part of that. Lastly, I just want to make the case that textbooks can be a problem in teaching entrepreneurship because, again, it's evolving year to year. One time I picked up a textbook we were using to teach starting a new venture. It had a section on intellectual property, and everything in the section was wrong because the intellectual property law changed the previous year. And here was a textbook that was completely out of date, and it was only a year old. That's why I advocate for publicly available, licensed under the Creative Commons, open courseware materials for teaching entrepreneurship. And that you can use cases. Now, how do you use cases? In this slide, I make the contention that doing your own cases probably better than using the Harvard case studies. Now, we always love the prestige of a Harvard case study. They're great things, right? But they are kind of canned, and they may not be as up to date as you might want them to be. And as we will see, we have been able to create cases that our students can relate to because they're about other UMass Lowell students or people from the UMass Lowell community. Here's an example that in that picture, we see a case on Invisaware, which is a group of students that won our Difference Maker contest, went on to win other competitions, and have gone on national TV. By using cases like this of individuals, they say, maybe I could do that too. And those cases are available online, and they also can give you some ideas of cases that you could use in your class that would appeal. One of the cases we have in here is, as I said, a UMass Lowell graduate, Harish Handi, who graduated from the engineering school at UMass Lowell, went back to India, founded Selco, Solar Electric Lighting Company, and it's both a social and a for-profit company. And when students see that, they say, could I follow in his footsteps? I think I can. So here's a list of some of the cases. And again, I just provide this for the links for you, not that I'm going to be able to go into those, but to show you that I have everything on here from energy to the CRISPR, a famous patent war between MIT and the University of California on CRISPR, which is a way of editing the genome. And there's a great case on intellectual property, and there's just a whole variety of things that you can do. Now I want to shift for the last few minutes to talk about models of entrepreneurship, okay? Because that's changed rather dramatically too. The way we teach it needs to change. It has changed. So does the model. In the early days, it was all about the business plan and causal or traditional entrepreneurship. And there's still a lot of that around. Many places still have business plan competitions. Many places still teach students to do the business plan. We do that too. However, research tells us something about that model that tells us to be cautious. Effectual entrepreneurship became one of the first research-based models done by Sarah Saraswati from the University of Virginia, the Darden School. And then came along the Lean Launchpad as developed by Stiefel and deployed in the United States through the National Science Foundation ICOR program for commercialization of research into technological entrepreneurship. So this slide just summarizes the things I've said before, which is that we're in a state of flux in which we recognize now that the business plan became a little too prescriptive It's not that there's anything wrong with writing a business plan. I still encourage those I mentor to do so. It's a really good idea, but it is a bad thing if you assume that that plan is actually going to work the way you wrote it, that you're going to get the revenues you expect, the customers you expect. The annoying fact is that many businesses didn't start with business plans, and in fact, that you have to completely revise your business plans regularly. So the scholars looked at this and they said that, my goodness, really starting a new venture is a learning process, not an execution process. You're going to go out and find out what works and what doesn't work, and you're going to iterate again and again, to repeat again and again until you get it right. And every time you get it wrong, it's not a failure, it's a learning process, and then you pivot. And I'll show some examples of that. Now, these are the 5 principles of effectual entrepreneurship. The bird in the hand, who are you, what do you know, who do you know, what do you have, your experiences, in other words. The affordable loss, entrepreneurs do take risks, but they're not gamblers. They take calculated risks, and they limit the downside risk. Lemonade, that's what I just said. Use your lemons to make lemonade. I said, you go out into the market, you discover something's wrong with your business plan, something's wrong with your product, something's wrong with your service. You use that bad news as a way to figure out the good news. The patchwork quilt is one of the principles of effectual entrepreneurship. Form partnerships, the pilot and the plane, control rather than predict. In other words, you don't predict the future the way you did in a business plan. You control the future. You fly the plane to where you want it to be rather than predict where the plane is going. Now, the National Science Foundation adopted this of many of these concepts in the leading launchpad to encourage scientists and engineers. And you can, a lot of what I want to do is to provide links for your reading, for your further study, and I have this for the I-Corps here. And it's based on a lot of the same research as that Sarah Saraswati did as a scholar. But Blank really managed to package that. He's a serial entrepreneur, and he's a good marketeer. And he really put it together in a nice thing that the U.S. National Science Foundation could take out to the universities, to research institutes, and so on. And here are some of the components of the customer development process for Steve Blank, okay? One is the minimum viable product. And this is a product that is not the minimum product entirely. It has to be viable. It has to be something you can take to the customer and see whether or not they're interested in it. Once you've taken it to the customer through this customer discovery process and customer development process, you learn what they like about a product or a service or what they don't, and you then change, pivot, and you repeat the process. That requires you to get out of the building, and of course he, in his usual way, he likes to kind of catch your attention by saying no business plan survives first contact with the customers. So, okay, he has a bunch of quotes that you look here that, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. That was a boxer. Mike Tyson said that. But it's the same thing with a new venture. You have a plan, you go out there, the customers kind of, give you a pushback and say, well, this is going to work because blah, 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 blah. And okay, you fix your product, you help understand what the customer wants. And the other thing that he said, quotable quote was, no one aside from venture capitalists in the former Soviet Union require 5-year plans to forecast a series of unknowns. These plans are generally fiction, and conceiving them is almost always a waste of time. The most important thing is that their startups aren't smaller versions of a big company. They're not executing a scalable business model. They are, in fact, a temporary organization designed to search, a temporary organization created to search, explore, and validate an unmet need for a repeatable and scalable business model. Once you found that, you're not a startup anymore. You are now an established venture. And so that's what the Lean Launchpad was all about. And it wasn't that doing a business plan was bad. It's just that too many people believed that a business plan was a prescriptive plan. And I always told my students that the development of any plan was, at the end, the first thing you do, you put the plan together, you think it's the greatest plan that you've ever made, and then you step back and ask yourself, what am I going to do when the plan doesn't go as planned? For some students, that's very difficult. They say, oh, no, I'm brilliant. My plan will work just fine. It's perfect. I have a perfect plan. Those students are going to have a very hard time in life. You really need to convince them that in spite of the fact that they're brilliant, in spite of the fact that they are the smartest person in the room, that their plan may not be perfect, and they're going to have to learn, and they're going to have to see how to do this. So this is an entrepreneurship plan on evidence. I've already done this about the National Science Foundation. So the point is that we are in a position of teaching entrepreneurship where we have to present a variety of models. I would be remiss, though, if I didn't at least take a second to point out that all new technologies have to overcome resistance. The picture that you see here is a picture of Charlie Chaplin made in 1936 in a film called Modern Times. It captured the anxiety of those that were going through what was then technological entrepreneurship. So there are side effects to technological entrepreneurship, and our societies, our cultures, our governments need to help us cope with that, and we need to recognize the anxiety that those around us have. In his day, it was being caught in the cogs of the great machine of industry in the Industrial Revolution of the time, right? In our day, there's fears that we're going to be replaced by robots. These technologies do change our lives, and we have to find ways to adapt to the new technologies. I do like to tell the story of a time that I was in China in the early days, in the early 80s, and I was in Tianjin, China. I'd been to Nankai University and Tianjin University and was doing work with them. It was the early days of Chinese development in the early 80s. Come so much further today than they did then. They were building a new airport. I was watching them do the runway. They had hundreds, thousands of men with shovels grading the new runway areas. And I sat there with the government officials and I asked, I said, but why don't you just bring in a bulldozer and get this done? And I said, I know you have bulldozers, using them in a variety of areas. And the Chinese officials turned to me at that time and said, but what would they do? Well, that's the key thing that Charlie Chaplin was asking. That's a key thing that we're asking as we see automation and robotics potentially changing our lives. We all ask the question, what would they do? My reply to them was, why don't you have them build bulldozers? Now, that was hard for them to understand at the time, but I guarantee you they understood it very, very quickly, because when I went back a few years later, the entire region had been transformed, the airport was finished, and those individuals that had worked doing that sort of thing were doing different things. So just to say that technological entrepreneurship and the things that we do change the world, and in that change of the world, we have to recognize that individuals, human beings, are displaced. And so as part of our teaching technological entrepreneurship, we really want to help our students to understand that change is coming, it's relentless. Remember, we started with creative destruction. Some people find that a little bit daunting. They don't like the term creative destruction because it says that some new invention is going to destroy some old way of life, just like the automobile destroyed the buggy industry, just like the microcomputer destroyed the mini computer, just like the CDs and now digital delivery of music has completely destroyed the record industry, except for the collectors and so on. So that is part of it as well. Now, I have much more that I could say and much more in this that you're welcome to go on, but I do want to stay within the time, and I want to save some time for individuals to be able to ask questions or for discussion. And I know that both Professor Mehta and Professor Vadula also have some comments or questions that they'd like to do. So I will end on this slide, and thank you so much for your attention today.
Thank you so much, Jack. It's a very fascinating presentation from you. Ashwin, you want to jump in and make any comments while I ask the audience if they would like to add any questions, comments, discussion items, and I would encourage all the participants to do that.
Yes, thank you, Krishna, and thank you, Dr. Wilson, so much. This was a great presentation, discussion on the important topic of technological entrepreneurship. I just want to comment on a couple of upcoming webinars that we have that are going to be very interesting to you. On October 7th, we have a webinar that's going to discuss the entrepreneurship ecosystem at KLE Technological Institution in Hubli, India. They are our great partner in our Global Entrepreneurship Exchange Program. And then on October 23rd, we have another one on the crowdfunding, research and practices. I think it will be quite interesting and useful for many of the faculty. For more information, you can visit our website, uml.edu/GE2 or uml.edu/Wilson-Center. You can also follow us on some of the social media websites. And thank you so much for your attendance. And I now turn it over to Krishna Vadula for any questions.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to look out for questions here. I've got a couple of short ones. One, Deepak Vaikar from Singapore I was asking the question of whether in entrepreneurship, is it a trait or a skill or a combination of both?
That's a very great question, and there's been a lot of research on that. And I think what the research basically says is that it is a combination of both. There's a topic of entrepreneurial awareness we talk about that some people seem to be entrepreneurially aware just naturally, but research does seem to show that we can build that awareness in other individuals who may not have it. So there's been some research on this to show that entrepreneurial education can be effective in building the traits of an entrepreneur, and that it's not the case that entrepreneurs are born, not made, right? They may be born, but they're also made. And so it's a combination of the two of them. And it's certainly true, and it's been shown by research, that you can build these skills. So the characteristics can be developed, and the skills most definitely may be taught.
Okay, so the next question is from Tani. It's a question about how would you describe entrepreneurs? Entrepreneurs.
Entrepreneurs. Another very good question. And in fact, if I have more time, and in my courses, I go into that in some detail, because it's a very, very important topic of entrepreneurship. Sometimes we say corporate entrepreneurship, but in corporate entrepreneurship, I divide that into two pieces. The traditional corporate entrepreneurship, where they actually invest and maybe acquire outside companies and so on, and entrepreneurs, where they actually do this within the company, where you develop individuals within the company. That was really my early point, which I didn't have time in my 45 minutes today to develop too much, that if you are in a large company and you do not have entrepreneurs, understanding how to move this company forward, then in fact, there's a very good chance that your company will eventually fail. So entrepreneurship is the ability to foster a culture of innovation within larger organizations and to foster those individuals who have the capability of moving that forward. There are a variety of strategies. If you go to the one of my courses, you can see the variety of strategies that corporations can use to develop entrepreneurs. But just quickly, I would have to say, one of the things you have to do is protect them. For example, I'll use IBM as an example. IBM is one of the few large companies that figured out that the personal computer was going to be a big deal when they first saw the hobbyists like the Apple II and the Altair and MITS and a variety of the Commodore PET and all of those toys. They said, oh, wait a minute, this is going to be a big deal. We got to figure it out. But if they tried to figure it out at IBM headquarters in New York, they knew that the establishment in the IBM headquarters would kill it because it was a threat to them. It could cannibalize their business. So they took the whole IBM PC business and they moved it to Boca Raton, Florida, where they sent a bunch of entrepreneurs and they created what's called a skunk works to develop the IBM PC. They later moved that group to Raleigh, North Carolina, again, to protect them from the company itself. Other companies failed to do that. Eastman Kodak, for example, that, the largest photography company in the world, great experts in chemistry, well, they also developed digital photography. And they had terrific people to do this, but they didn't do what IBM did. And as a result, everybody in the company that had a vested interest in what they were already doing made it very, very difficult for Eastman Kodak to be successful in digital photography. So entrepreneurship is very, very important. There's a variety of strategies you can use, and I just suggested a couple of those.
Commented on that, has also followed up saying that entrepreneurs can become role models and they can bring good return on investment. So that's good.
That's a great point. I would like to reinforce that in fact, an entrepreneur does become a good role model. And then other employees see that they're rewarded and they become more entrepreneurial themselves or more entrepreneurial within the large enterprise. And that's great for a company when that happens.
Anil Kumar Pandit asks whether Agile is taught in engineering institutions to leverage changes. Is that something that is taught in courses? Agile
Agile techniques are taught in this course, and in fact, later in this presentation, which could have gone on for much longer, I began to present some of the details of the Lean Launchpad and the process, and have a couple slides on Agile technologies, which are very, very important. So yes, they should be included in the technological entrepreneurship. And if you go to that technological entrepreneurship website that I have, you can find some materials to help teach the Agile.
Okay. Comment from Deepak again about this recent example about Thomas Cook going bankrupt. Is it going to raise questions of ethical practices in entrepreneurship?
I'm not sure. Was the question, does this raise questions about practices in entrepreneurship, Thomas Cook going bankrupt?
Yeah, that's the question, but I'm not familiar with the Thomas Cook case. But
okay, I am familiar with the Thomas Cook case, which is a very recent one. They went bankrupt this past week. It's created a tremendous challenge for the United Kingdom, where they're headquartered, and where many of their customers are located. Their customers are stuck all around the world now, and the United Kingdom is taking the responsibility of flying them back to to their home. at great expense. And so Thomas Cook went bankrupt. Now, why did they go bankrupt? It is a good example of the dinosaurs that I talked about. Well, there's two pieces to it. One is the fact that Thomas Cook didn't understand that the travel business had changed tremendously. They were executing a business model that worked incredibly well for such a long time. So just like Eastman Kodak was executing a business model that worked incredibly well for such a long time, and they found it impossible to recognize that the world of travel had changed and that people's travel habits had changed. So that was part of it. So they failed to see, they were the dinosaur who failed to see that creative destruction was happening in the Airbnbs of the world and the other, all of the airline websites and so on and so forth, that it would be very difficult for them to execute the same business model. The other part of it is more financial, though. They also tremendously over-leveraged themselves with borrowing, and that leverage, which is really more for a financial professor to talk about, but it was the combination failure to innovate and recognize that the business models of travel had changed in the world, and that they failed to manage their finances properly and over-leveraged themselves and ended up with too much debt to be able to survive.
Okay, so with that, I think we should move to closing comments. Ashwin, Jack.
Thank you so much again, Krishna, for organizing this webinar. And thank you so much, Dr. Wilson, for giving an excellent discussion on technological entrepreneurship. And I want to thank all the attendees and to remind them to mark your calendar for the upcoming two webinars, October 7th and October 23rd. We will send you more information. And if you have any question about our entrepreneurship education webinars, please feel free to contact us. Thank you so much.
I'll make a similar offer. We go to www.jackmwilson.com, and you can use any of the materials on there, any of the case studies, any of the textbooks. They're free for you to use. But also feel free to contact me if you'd like to have any discussion about any of these issues, and if I can be helpful to you in any way in the teaching of entrepreneurship in general, global entrepreneurship, and technological entrepreneurship in particular, please do. And as I said, I have much more information on teaching technological entrepreneurship. You may want to go through some of that other material at some point. Thank you very much for being a great audience. The questions were absolutely terrific. I appreciate that. Thank you, Krishna, for organizing it.
Okay, thank you, Ashwin. Thank you, Jack, and thank you, audience. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.